Grief is not the end of your story, it's the beginning of a new chapter. Welcome to the Empower Grief Journey podcast. I'm your host, Chris Mamone, and I'm the founder of the Empower Grief Journey coaching and podcast platform. This podcast is your dedicated space for healing, growth, and transformation. Each episode shares real conversations with people around the world who have navigated grief and discovered the strength to create inspiring new beginnings. Together, we'll walk from grief to empowerment through stories, practical tools, and actionable insights. You'll uncover the hidden gifts within your grief, reclaim your personal power, and step into a future filled with courage and hope. Today, I have an awesome guest with us. Her name is Carolyn Gower. She's a grief and life coach, certified grief educator, speaker, author, and podcaster based in Ballarat, Australia. Carolyn became widowed in 2017 when her beloved husband Tony died from prostate cancer. In the wake of his death, she was stunned by how grief illiterate our society is, and a fire was lit inside her to change that. She faced her own near death experience when she was diagnosed with necrotizing fasciitis, a deadly flesh eating bacteria, and sepsis. She underwent 15 surgeries along her healing journey and was also in a coma for about a month. She's found the voice of grief movement and channels her passion into supporting grievers across the globe. And so, without further ado, I want to introduce you guys to Carolyn. Carolyn, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Chris. I'm so excited to be here with you today.
Likewise, and I love, by the way, that we're about 7,000 miles apart and one giant ocean away from each other, and we still get to connect here today to shed light and empower people through grief.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I'm in your tomorrow.
That's right. The future can talk.
Yeah.
Well, Carolyn, as we get started with the podcast, I usually let my guests, share with us a little bit more about their story. I know I read a little bit from your bio, but I just want to say I'm very sorry that you lost Tony to prostate cancer. I know that's one that affects us men very heavily in our older age. And I also cannot believe that you underwent a medical induced in coma and went through 15 surgeries. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen that can't see this, she also broke her shoulder recently. And Carolyn is still here fighting and keeping alive. It's a beautiful thing to watch.
Yeah, so I am currently nursing a broken shoulder and wrist, which I had to have surgery on. So I have added to that list of surgeries. I think I've had 18 in the last 2 years. So hopefully no more.
Yeah, I'm gonna say no more surgeries for you. Let's live you live your life in peace.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
So tell us a little bit about this grief journey that you've been on, because not a lot of people have had that life experience that you've had, and let alone 18 surgeries. I can't even imagine to begin with that. But tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, sure. So I met Tony in 2011, so we met a bit later in life. We'd both been previously married and divorced, and I'd been a single mum of three kids for about 16 years. And I guess I was at a point where I'd kind of given up on love and didn't know if it was something that was going to be in my future again. But in a lonely moment, I got on a dating website and ended up eventually finding Tony. And we had our first date, which was just a coffee date. And I kind of knew straight away that he was something special. And it was all really new to me after so long that, wow, I can feel those feelings so quickly. And luckily, he felt the same. So, about 5 months into our relationship, Tony had to have just a normal medical physical for his job. And they decided to do a prostate cancer test that when they were doing all the other blood tests, even though he had no symptoms, he was under the age that they would normally test. He was 48 at the time. And they discovered that his PSA, which is the measure for prostate cancer, was extremely high. So it was about 200, and it should have been between 0 and 2. So, of course, we were a bit worried about that. But in the back of our minds, we were thinking prostate cancer, that's usually probably a better cancer. You don't die from it, you usually die with it when you're older, which is true for men who get it when they're older. But unbeknownst to us, when you get it when you're younger, it can be quite aggressive, which Tony's was. And it turned out that he carried the faulty BRCA2 gene, which does dispose you to, things like breast cancer, ovarian cancer, and prostate cancer for men. So um, we found out pretty quickly that it wasn't curable, it was treatable. They couldn't tell us for how long. So all of a sudden, we learnt that our time together was going to be limited. So we decided pretty quickly that no matter how long we had, we were going to make the most of it. We were going to enjoy each other for as long as we were given. And we did. And it wasn't like, live like there's no tomorrow, because in the real world, that's just not practical. We still had to work, we still had to do all the day to day things, but we made time for each other and we really appreciated each other. And we made a deal that Sundays were our day. So every Sunday we would do something together, whether it was go for a picnic or a drive and explore new places or a weekend away. That was our day that we did things together. And we ended up doing some really beautiful things and having some, wonderful adventures and things that I can now hold in my heart, all those memories. So it ended up, we got almost 6 years together before Tony did die from his prostate cancer. And when that happened, even though we knew it was going to happen, it's never something you can prepare for. So, watching someone you love die is horrible. Like they completely change. Everything changes. Like the way they look is completely different to how they looked. And you're going through this big journey together of all these tests and what's going to work, what isn't. It's kind of like you're always on edge. But we kind of made a deal to live our lives and live the cancer around it. So the cancer wasn't the focus of our life. Being together, enjoying our life was our main focus. And when we had to do the cancer stuff, okay, we'll do it then. And that turned out to be a really good way to do it. But when Tony died, grief is completely different to what you think it's going to be. It's, as you know yourself, Chris, it's just horrible and it consumes you, and you wonder how on earth you're ever going to be happy again or find any joy in life again, or how you're going to live with that pain for the rest of your life. And all the time you're living in a world that just assumes that you might grieve for a year and then you'll be over it. Now you'll be all good to go. Life will be back to normal. You'll be back to your old self, and the good times will come again. But as we know, it just doesn't happen like that. And I guess, I didn't want to leave Tony behind. I didn't want to grieve for a year and then be expected to forget about him. So as that time got closer and I realized that I still miss him just as much as I did on day one, I'm still grieving just as much as I was in the earlier days. And I don't want to leave him behind. I don't want to forget about him. I don't want people around me to forget about him. So I sure as hell know, like if I died, I didn't want people to forget that I lived. So I kind of made it my mission to educate people about grief, that it is normal, it's a normal reaction to loss, to losing someone that you love. So why is it treated like it's something so taboo? Why are we, frowned upon if we show our grief or our sadness? It makes people uncomfortable, but it really shouldn't. It's such a normal and natural part of life. So, I started doing my best to gradually educate people and post things on social media, and realized that I wanted to be a coach. I didn't want others to go through what I'd been through, because 8.5 years ago when Tony died, there was no real support. There was not the social media groups or support groups that there are now. In fact, the only, widowed support group was people, ladies in their 80s and 90s. And I didn't feel that was an age group that I could relate to at that time. You know, my views changed a bit now, but at that time it wasn't something that I felt was right for me. So, you know, in that time, I've learned a lot about grief. I've learned from my personal experiences. I've done loads of courses and programs. And, you know, it is really a passion of mine to help people through their grief and let them know it is okay. It's okay to bring your person into your future with you. They're a part of your lives. You're who you are because you love them, and you're who you are because you lost them. So they're always going to be a part of you. And it felt very empowering for me when I knew that I didn't have to leave Tony behind, that I could bring my love for him and my memories for him and part of him into my future. I didn't have to let him go. And that really helped me. That really gave me comfort in knowing that I could do that. And I really got to the point where I don't care what other people think about that. I know there's going to be people that think, oh, that's a bit weird, still talking about them, you know, even after 8 years where I'm now, you know, why are you still talking about him so much? But, you know, who wants to be forgotten? He's a big part of my life. He's still a big part of my life. Even though he's not here in, you know, the physical world, he's still a huge part of my life. And I don't want to forget that. So I won't. um, yeah, but I'm sure you can relate to a lot of these things as well, Chris, with your grief experiences. And I feel that grief is, you know, as you say, about empowering people to grieve in a way that feels right for them. There's no right or wrong way in grief. There's no rule book, and it's something that you don't know until you know. So in my, you know, before grief, I'm sure I've said the wrong things to people that are grieving. I've looked at it differently, but when that happens to me, I try and think, you know, that people don't know what they don't know, and you don't want them to know. You don't want them to experience it. So, you know, I do give people some grace if they say something that's not quite right or a little bit off for how we know you should speak to people in grief. But, you know, there still are some people that are just heartless and say the most ridiculous, stupid things. So sometimes I'll educate them. Sometimes I'll just think, that's not worth my time. Just let it go.
You know, I love that you said that because something that I really I don't know if educate's the right word, but I bring awareness to is that when we're going through grief, we're in a very emotionally volatile state and we are looking for people to understand what we went through. And the reality is that grief is a very individual journey and people experience it in their own ways. And what does happen, like you brought up, is we talk to people who have not walked our walk before and they say hurtful and sensitive things. And whether that's conscious or unconscious, it still hurts a griever. And something that I share with people going through grief, because I experienced it myself, is that you're going to want to lash out sometimes. You're going to want to say, hey, that was really hurtful, or that was insensitive, or why would you say something like that? And I've gotten to this place where I've learned that people can resonate with you to the level of experiences they have in life. And if somebody, if somebody hasn't lost a loved one yet to cancer, I've walked the cancer journey multiple times. That's a rough one. It's a very, very hard journey. And you can have all the positive, happy thoughts you want, but at the end of the day, for most of those things, there's not a happy ending. It's not going to be one that's going to be easy. And so always tell grievers that if you have to manage the emotions of somebody else around you while you're grieving, it's not the safe person for you. It's not the right person. And I'd rather you protect yourself and your energy and go find people that are safe for you to be around because that takes away from your experience. It takes away from where you need to be focused. And the only person you really need to care about at that point really is you, and how to best heal yourself.
Oh, I totally agree. You really have to prioritize yourself when you're grieving and protect your peace. You can't take on, you know, someone else's energy during that time. And even though a lot of people are coming from a good place with good intentions, what they're doing is actually dismissing your pain, dismissing your grief, and dismissing how, you are feeling. And that can feel really hurtful when you're in that deep place of grief, that they're just, especially things that begin with at least, like, at least they're in a better place, at least you can have more kids, at least you can find someone else. All these things that begin with at least are just dismissing the fact that someone that you love has just died and you're in the worst pain of your life. And I just find that so insensitive.
I couldn't agree more with you about that. I heard those things after I lost my son, like, well, at least you make beautiful babies. And I was just like sitting there
Yeah.
going, really now? Like, that's what you had to say? And then, the whole, oh, you'll have another one. And I'm going, you can't replace this and you can't fix this. That's the whole point. Um, we can't bring Tony back. Can't fix
No,
that. And so to say those things to people is just really hurtful. It's very like not, it's dismissive, like you were talking about, not
yeah,
holding space.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So, tell me a little bit about, I know you went through that grief process with Tony. What was that season of grief like for you after his passing? Did you, grief, I always say, is kind of a wild monster. There's days that you are going to feel quote unquote normal. I don't like that word, but normal in a sense. There's days where it's really heavy, and then there's days you're just kind of numb and you're just trying to
Yeah,
figure out how to get through that next day. What was that like for you?
yeah. Those early days were just horrible. And on top of that, my future was a bit unknown, as in like where I was going to live and that sort of thing. Tony and I, met later in life, as I said. We didn't have any savings. We both sort of were starting from scratch financially wise. And we were renting a house that when he died, I could no longer afford to pay the rent by myself. So, because I'd had to leave my job to care for him for the last year of his life, which I didn't mind doing at all. But all of a sudden, he's died. And the money from the government that I was getting was such a small amount, it wasn't even anywhere near the rent for 1 week. So I had to move in with my parents, which is not something I expected doing at that time in my life. But I do love them, but just not where I expected to be. So I had to move in with them until I could get on my feet. So in this early grief, I was trying to find a job, and course, they ask about the gap in your work history. And I was honest, my husband was dying and I was his carer, and he passed away. And as soon as they hear that, they just think, no, you're too hard, you're too emotional. One workplace that I was interviewing for even said to me, look, you're perfect for the job, but we don't think it's the right time. Come back in a year and we'll give you a job. And I'm just, no, I need a job now. Like, forget about it. So there was a lot going on in those early days that was hard to deal with, in early grief. Um, People often say that the second year is harder than the worst. And in my case, I did find it harder. I think the first year I was so numb and I was keeping myself busy. I was really trying to distract myself. When I got my job, I was overworking. I was avoiding going home to an empty house and an empty bed. And I was not looking after myself. I was sleeping only 3 or 4 hours a night. I was working hard. I was just really avoiding my grief as much as I could. But then, it gets to that point where it just hits you in the face and you do have to face it. So, I guess the way I got through that was I started becoming more curious. So, for me, curiosity was a big thing because there was nowhere really that I could get advice that would help me. I'd Google things and it just was very generic and didn't sit right with me. So, I thought, right, I need to find my own way through this because I just can't imagine being in this much pain for the rest of my life. I need to work it out myself. I felt it was more about carrying the grief. As I said, once I realized I don't have to leave him behind, it's how am I going to carry this grief and my love for Tony into my future? How am I going to integrate it into my life? Because I still wanted him in my life in whatever way he could be. So I got really curious looking at how grief was affecting me, what I was doing, when I felt better, what I was doing when I felt worse, who I was around when I felt better, who I was around when I felt worse, and the things that made me feel better. It's right, okay, I've got to do more of this stuff. And I even had a list of things that, you know, brought me a little bit of joy or made me feel a little bit better. So when I was feeling down, instead of, I think it's important to sit with your grief, acknowledge it, all that sort of thing. And I was definitely doing that, but it's very easy for that to snowball and you end up going down this rabbit hole of thoughts and get into a really negative place. So I remember times that I'd be sitting in a chair at home and I'd start thinking and I'd be sad. And next thing I know, 3 hours had gone by and I'd gone down this big rabbit hole of thoughts and emotions. And it just wasn't helpful to do that day after day. So I made this list. One thing that helped me was I had one grandson at the time. I've now got four grandchildren, but was being around my grandson. So I might go and visit my daughter and her partner and my grandson, and I knew that would cheer me up. That would make me feel a little bit better. I found it really important to find just a little pocket of joy in each day. It's not about so much about gratitude, it's more about finding a little bit of joy and just expanding on that as we go. And I think in grief, your mind still needs to remember that you're capable of experiencing joy. Like it's not all negative. We've got to look for a little bit of joy, no matter how tiny it is, even if it's going outside, feeling the sun on your face for a few minutes and just being in that moment. We need to remind ourselves that our life is hard and it's painful, but we still are capable of feeling those small moments of joy. And that, can grow over time. And like where I am now, I would say I'm leading a happy life. I'm not repartnered. I haven't ruled it out, but I haven't pursued it at the moment because there's been other things going on. Um, but I would say I'm happy. I still miss Tony. I still think I'm a griever. I'm grieving. I will always grieve for Tony. But for me, grief isn't a negative word. As I said before, it's a natural part of our human experience. And grief isn't just what a lot of people think, that it's sadness and pain and it's horrible and it's dark. For me, just speaking for myself, grief is also love. It's the love I had for him. It's the memories I have of him. It's all those beautiful things that he brought into my life, encompassed in my grief for this wonderful man that I only had for 6 years. My grief isn't just all the dark, horrible stuff. So I now look at grief in a positive light. I don't think it's bad that I say I'm grieving or I'm having a griefy day because we will. Like 8.5 years out, I still have days where I feel griefy, whether it's the anniversary or his birthday or something, or whether it's a random Tuesday when a song comes on that reminds me of him, or a memory flashes into my head. We still have those griefy moments or those griefy days. The only difference is now that I know that those emotions in that moment don't last forever. Like I know that I'm not going to be in that pain, in that sadness consistently for the rest of my life. It comes and goes like the waves of grief. And even though I've been through some other really horrible experiences in the time since Tony's died, I and people say to me, like, especially when I just recently, broke my shoulder and my wrist, and they're, oh no, how do you do it? You have so much bad luck. How do you get through it? I say, yeah, well, I have had some bad things happen, but that's not all that's happened in the time since Tony died. Like, there's been so many times that I've enjoyed my life. I've had so much fun. There's been happiness. And even last Thursday was one of the best days of my life because I got to see my daughter get married. And it was a destination wedding with just family. And we were sharing a house together. So I got the pleasure of experiencing, the preparations and that special time and the wedding. And even though I had that griefy time during that, oh, if only Tony was here to see that, to witness this, you know, the day was just beautiful. And I had lots of little signs during that day that Tony was there with us. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that even though bad things happen, don't forget to acknowledge the good things that we are still capable of feeling. Don't forget to bring that joy and allow that joy into your life because, even though bad things happen, good things still happen too. And I think of it like grief is still here, but so are you, so are we. We're still here as well. And I feel that Tony was robbed of the life, the future that he had and that we had. And I don't want to waste that. I mean, there's times where, you put things off and you're in a bit of limbo and you're on hold in that during the grief. But I'm at the point now where life's beautiful. I'll always miss him. It still hurts. But, I'm still here. And there's so many other good things happening in my life that I'm here. I'm enjoying life. It's just not how I expected it to be. And
Yeah.
I kind of look at grief like we're carrying a backpack. So we've got this backpack on our back and it's always there. We can't take it off. Some days it feels really heavy and we struggle with it and it feels like it's full of big, heavy rocks. And other days it feels, much lighter, like it might be empty. But we always know it's there. We can always feel it. It's there deep down. And I think that's like grief. You always know it's there. Some days it's heavy, some days it's light and you feel all the joy, but you still know it's there.
I think that's a beautiful analogy for grief, and you really are speaking to what the Empower Grief Journey is all about. And I think that, people misunderstand when I say being empowered by your grief, and they think it means being happy 24/7 and like you're fine kind of thing. And it's the opposite of that. It's to understand the purpose of that journey. It's to understand that, like you said, joy and grief can coexist. Some days grief is going to be really heavy, other days it's not. Something you said that I can resonate with is my first year of grief after losing Caden was very, very hard. And the second year, it was easier in little ways, but it got really bad on his birthday kind of thing. And so
Yeah.
I try to share with people that grief really just is up and down all the time. And, I'm a big proponent of trying to shed light in the grief space because when we deny ourselves the ability to express our emotions, let alone feel our emotions, and where I live a lot, which is trying to understand what they're trying to communicate with me, we miss opportunities to find happiness in life. We miss opportunities to understand what grief is giving us or allowing for our life and making room for in our new life that we're creating. And so I
Yeah.
really try to encourage people to understand that grief is a very, very powerful tool in your life. It is something that can be empowering to you. But you have to allow yourself time and space to understand and listen to those messages that it's trying to communicate with you.
Oh, I totally agree. And it's not about time heals all wounds. You know, I hate that saying, but with time, we learn about our grief. We learn how to carry it, how to integrate it into our life, and how it affects us. We can recognize, what might be triggering or activating for our grief. Um, and that's what time gives us, not that it heals us, because I don't think grief is something that should be tried to be healed. We can find healing along the way, but I don't think it's something, it doesn't need to be healed. It's a normal part of life, as I said. It's not a cut on our finger that's going to heal. It's just now part of
Yeah.
our life. And people don't understand that. But,
Yeah.
you and I, you can see easily that we're on the same page with all of it. And so it's a bit like a lot of people I work with are widowed people, and same as me, hate the word widow. When I was first widowed, just could not stand that word widow. But now I have a totally different view on it. I mean, it's just a word anyway, but I was really proud to be Tony's wife. I loved him. I loved being his wife. And I feel kind of honored and proud that I'm his widow. I'm not his ex. We didn't have a relationship that broke up or anything like that. I'm proud to be his widow, just like I'm proud to be his wife. So it's once again, as you say, about empowering yourself to, you know, look at it and think of it the way you want to see it. What empowers you within your grief experience? And that word widow now feels empowering to me. It doesn't have that negative connotation that takes away from who I am. So I've got no qualms in saying, yeah, I'm his widow or whatever. It is a thing of pride with me that, I'm still his.
Yeah, well, you said something that I talked about on a podcast. I shocked somebody earlier this year when they brought up this concept of fully healed. And I said, I'm not fully healed. And they said,
Oh,
You don't want to be fully healed? And I said, No, because I'm never going to be. And they looked at
no.
me like really perplexed on my face. And they said, What do you
Oh,
mean by that? And I said, Well, let me explain it to you. I said, I lost my son, right? And he goes, Yeah. And I said, Am I ever going to get over that? And he's like, Well, no, but you still have to move forward in life. And I said, here's the thing about this term fully healed.
yeah,
Fully healed means that you have no emotional connection whatsoever to that loss that happened for you or happened to you, whatever you want to call it. And you're able to confidently say, I lost Tony or I lost Caden, and it happened. It is a thing that happened in my life, but I'm okay now. I'm good. Grief doesn't work
mm,
that way. And people are emotional beings who don't think that way. And so society wants us to live there, but unfortunately, we're humans. We're emotional. We can't. And so
yeah,
I think it's really lying to ourselves, and in a lot of ways, it's a disservice to our own acknowledgement to have this concept of chasing this thing of fully healed.
yeah,
I just feel like if you're chasing that, you're going to be chasing it the whole time until you die because it's not going to happen. And so
no,
the better thing for you to say to yourself is, I'm healing. I'm doing what I'm where
yeah,
I need to be right now. I acknowledge that my grief is heavy today, or my grief isn't as heavy today, and just giving yourself space to be who you are, not trying to constantly chase things because we end up in this place all the time in life where we try to do anything we can possible to avoid pain. All of us do.
yeah,
And but the reality of life is we're gonna break a shoulder and a wrist sometime. It's gonna happen. I broke 3 ribs skateboarding when I was a kid. Didn't plan on it that afternoon, but that's what happened.
yeah.
Um,
It does.
so pain is an inevitable part of life. It always will be here. So the thing that we should try to do is just accept that that is a part of life. Doesn't mean we like it and agree to it, by the way, or that we want it, but it just means that we say, this is a part of my journey and it will happen. And
Yeah.
I think that gives you permission, by the way, for yourself to understand and feel and be present with all those emotions that happen as you navigate grief.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I love that. And there's a saying that I really, really dislike, and it's positive vibes only. And you
Ugh.
see that everywhere. Positive vibes only. And I just think that's totally ridiculous. Like, even if you're not grieving, you're never happy 100% of the time. So, all emotions are valid. We feel emotions for a reason. Like we feel happiness because something nice has happened. We feel sadness because something, not so nice has happened. But every emotion is valid. It's all for a reason. And whether you're grieving or not, you're never going to be happy 24/7. So I really don't know why people think that grievers should be happy all the time when that's not the norm for society anyway. They'll accept other people, something will happen and they'll be upset about it or whatever. But when it comes to grieving, they just want to cheer you out of it. It's like, as I said before, dismissing your pain, and they'll just try and do everything they can to cheer you out of your grief rather than just sitting with you and,
Yeah.
holding space for
I
you.
I just, I've had too many people apologize to me in grief coaching for, being upset or being angry or, saying whatever, how they feel. And I just look at them all the time and say, why are you apologizing to me?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, why? And I'm not a fan of why questions all the time because they elicit blame with things, but I ask it in that moment to shock people for a second to stop and actually think about what they just said because I show them in those moments that there's no apology needed. There's not.
No,
There
no.
is how you feel today, and there is acknowledgement that you're grieving something, whatever it may be. And instead of somebody, that people say that because there's always an expectation to pop them out with happiness, like you said, and positivity. And
Yeah.
I'm one of those people which is why I coach all the time, is that I love giving people that space to just be. And when people are able to express themselves, get out their grief in whatever nature way it needs to come, oftentimes at the end of that is the positivity. At the very end of that is the positivity that comes out because we acknowledged something and held space for that grief and allowed ourselves to process the emotion. But when we do it the way society tells us, which is just skip over that and go right to positivity, well, we didn't acknowledge this thing back here. And I always say that emotions, when they're small, are very easy to deal with. And the truth of the thing is, they are. But when you build them up and hide them and suppress them, they turn into ugly monsters. And when they come out, it's very loud, it's very boisterous, it's very overwhelming. And that's why people have a hard time navigating grief is because they buried it so much and you need to let
Yeah.
it get out. Just release the beast is what I say. Just 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 let it out. It's all good.
Yeah.
No one's gonna cause raves or anything, but you need to really feel how you feel inside and really get that out so that you can actually process it and understand what it's trying to teach you. I think that's the big thing I try to tell grievers. You're not broken. You don't need to be fixed. There's not a problem with you. You're going through something very heavy. You just lost somebody. You lost a spouse. You lost a child. You lost a job. You lost a marriage through divorce. You've
Yeah.
gone through something. So I'd rather you acknowledge it than try to be happy 24/7 and let the monster grow.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it comes back from, when we were children, we'd fall over and scrape our knee and cry. And what would our parents do? Stop crying. It's okay. Stop crying. Here's a lollipop, or here's a cake or something to make you feel better. Like it was, as soon as we'd start crying, we were always pushed to get out of it as quickly as possible to stop crying, and that carries on into our adulthood. And I really love now that kids. I see my grandkids, and always when I'm with them, if they're feeling, if something happens, now we just sit with them and ask them about it, and talk to them about it instead of doing what we used to do. And I think that's going to see us having a lot more emotionally intelligent adults as they grow up. So I guess we're always learning. Like I know the way my parents parented was completely different to the way I did, and now the way my kids parent is different to the way I parented. So it's important to always learn and grow with it. And emotions need to be heard, they need to be talked about, they need to be helped, and that will allow, like even coming from these kids, for them as they grow older to talk about things when they're married or in relationships or whatever. They'll be more able to talk about these things because that's how they've grown up to do it. And I think we're going to be looking at a completely different future to what a couple of generations back were, as far as our emotions and acknowledging them. And I think that's wonderful.
I couldn't agree more with you about that because I do think that, overall, collectively as a society, if we would learn how to acknowledge emotions, acknowledge each other, and not try to constantly push our belief systems around, but hold space for people instead, I think we would see a radical shift in how we interact and engage with people, and let alone when we go through grief, not try to fix people all the time, but give them space to process things. And that's where I don't think people will spend years grieving if we have that kind of environment. I think it'll be a much shorter time, but it'll be a more meaningful and impactful experience, is
Yeah,
what I see. And that's what I want people to see with grief is that it is a very meaningful, impactful experience. But when you're in an environment like society today with toxic positivity and get over it and move on, that drags
mm,
out a lot. And then it drags out into problems in life, losing jobs or having bad relationships and things like that. Whereas that misses the opportunity. Whereas if we actually sit with it, value and appreciate what it's giving us or what it's trying to show us, I will share that when I lost my son, he showed me love in a way I've never felt in my entire life. He showed that to me.
yeah,
And so
yeah,
I can sit here and say that was a tragedy. It was horrible. It was awful. I'll say that it was. Those are facts. But I can also say I would never have experienced love on the way that I felt it if he had not come in my world the way that he did. And so I can still say that it was a tragedy, but I can also say it was one of my biggest gifts. And so
yeah,
it gives you the choice to decide how you want to handle your grief, how you want to remember that experience, what you want to take away from it. And I'm just in that place where I try to tell people that there's always a hidden gift, lesson, or blessing in those moments. There always is. And like you said to your experience of things, you had surgery 18 times, you got a broken shoulder and wrist right now, and you're still saying, I had one of the happiest times of my life last Thursday watching one of my daughters get married. Beautiful
yeah.
example of that.
Mm. I like a bit of a motto that I've been living by more recently is change the way you look at things, and the things you look at will change. And it's not to dismiss death or loss or anything like that. It's like I could have gone to the wedding last week. No, I was having pain. It was hard. I'll acknowledge that. And I could have gone to the wedding and thought, oh, this is horrible. I'm just so much in pain and this shouldn't have happened and been in a real victim mode. But I thought, no, look, it's happened. It's unfortunate. It's horrible. It's bad timing, but nothing's going to stop me enjoying this day. And I had the most amazing day that I've had since Tony died. And it was just because I chose to look at it in that way and enjoy it and see it for what it was. And I've done that quite a bit lately, and it's really refreshing and empowering and joyful. So, yeah, I like that little
Yeah.
motto.
I really love that. And Carolina, as we wrap up the podcast here, what I wanted to give space for is to talk about your book because and I'm gonna let you share the cover title for it because it's amazing. But tell me a little bit about your book and what led you to write it.
Yeah, so my first book is called The Stupid Shit People Say to Grievers. And anyone who's grieving will understand why I wrote it. I co-authored it with a good friend of mine, John Polo, who is a coach in the US as well. And we did a podcast together that we co-hosted called My Person Died Too. And we did an episode on the podcast about this, the stupid shit that people do say when you're grieving. And we asked people through our social media pages to share with us what's the most stupid thing that someone has said to you in grief. And it just went wild. We got, between us, we got something like 1,000 responses in a day. And we shared a lot of it on this episode. And I said to John later on, like, we need to write a book about this. Um, it just has to be done. I haven't seen anyone do it. It needs to be done, not only for grieving people to feel seen and acknowledged and go, oh, hell yeah, yeah, that's happened to me, um, but also to educate those who aren't grieving, to let them know it wasn't just the comments that we put in there. It was, okay, this is why it's not helpful to say this, and this is what you could do instead. So I called it like a coffee table book. So a book that a grieving person would buy, sit on their coffee table. It's got a big bright cover. When people come to visit, it stands out. So then, oh, what's this book? It's a book you can just pick up and flick through and read it really quickly or read part of it really quickly and get the idea of what it's about. So I was hoping in that way that would help to educate people that don't know what to say or that have said the wrong thing, this is what you can do instead. So, yeah, love that book. It's so easy to read. We've had a lot of great feedback about it. And I think it was, as I said, a book that just had to be written.
I really love that because there are a lot of comments out there people have heard as they navigate grief in a various way that is just insensitive and honestly just stupid shit like you called it. People say. So I love that you compiled a book together about that to help grievers kind of make peace with the things that get said. I personally feel like I need to buy a copy of that book so when I do hear those things I can make light of it. And again, you talked about changing perspective. I think that book can help people do exactly that. Where can people find the book if they're interested in buying it?
It's on Amazon worldwide. So wherever you are, you'll be able to find it on Amazon. Um, and it's on some other places as well, but yeah, mainly on Amazon.
Perfect. Well, I will definitely put a link in the show notes to that. And Carolyn, I just want to say a big thank you for coming on the show today and sharing your grief story about losing Tony and how you navigated grief. And I think you shared a lot of valuable lessons today for us to see the positive in grief and see the empowerment that it can be for us in life. Because as you alluded to today, you can still have a lot of bad things happen in life, but you can also still find beauty in moments of life to enjoy and appreciate.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
100%. And thanks so much for having me, Chris. It was a real pleasure to talk to you. We both get each other. We think the same way about grief and grieving. So it's been great to talk to you.
Well, as I usually wrap up the podcast, I usually ask my guests a couple questions. One of them is if you run into somebody going through grief or somebody who feels stuck in grief, what is one thing you would share with them to help them navigate that journey just a little easier?
Um, I would share that it's okay to grieve. It's okay to show your grief. I would sit down and talk to them and just say, tell me about your person. Because in the real world of grief, people don't talk about our person. That's, one of the things we shared in the book, that they feel scared to bring them up in case they're going to make us sad. And the thing is that people talking about them doesn't make us sad. Thinking that they've been forgotten and no one's talking about them is what will make us sad. So I would
Mm.
sit down, talk to them, ask them, tell me about your person, and allow them to share how they're feeling and just listen to them because you might be the only person that is listening to them and hearing their grief and seeing their grief.
I think that's beautiful advice. I try to share that with as many people as I can to simply be a listening ear for people that are going through grief. You don't always have to fill the void with conversation or trying to fix people, but just you have no idea how much it is to hold space for somebody and just listen and give them
Yeah,
space to process.
just that. I don't know what to say. I know this must be horrible for you. I don't know what to say, but I'm here for you. I'm here to listen. And that's as simple as it is. People, I think, have they put it on themselves to try and fix the griever or make them feel better or whatever. They can't do that. We know, as a griever, we know they cannot make us feel better. They cannot make us happy again. They can't cheer us out of it unless they can magically bring our person back. We know we don't expect them to fix us, but it would be nice for them to listen to us and acknowledge our pain. And that's such a simple thing to do compared to what people feel that they need to do.
I couldn't agree more with you on that one, Carolyn. And if people get done listening to this episode and they want to connect with you, where can they find you?
You can find me on Facebook, Carolyn Gower Coaching. You can find me on Instagram, uh, Voices of Grief Movement, and also Carolyn Gower Speaker. I've got two pages there. And my website is voicesofgrief.com.
I love that. And for listeners today, I will have Carolyn's social media links and her website link in the bio of the show notes. So go in there and take a look and get connected with her. She's a fabulous woman out of Australia, and I definitely recommend checking out her book, The Stupid Shit Grievers People Say to Grievers. I think it's a beautiful book. I'm actually gonna go purchase a copy of that myself because I'm entertained by that. And I love the lightheartedness that brings. So, Carolyn, thank you again so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's been a pleasure.
And I want to thank all of our listeners for joining Carolyn and I today on this episode of the Empower Grief Journey podcast. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with somebody you know who could benefit from Carolyn's story. For more episodes that are designed to empower you and support you during your grief journey, visit empowergriefjourney.com and subscribe to this podcast. You can also find us on Apple and Podbean. The Empower Grief Journey is all about honoring your journey, embracing your emotions, and finding strength in your own time. I want you to know you're never alone on this journey, and together we can navigate grief with courage and compassion. Until next time, be kind to yourself and take your grief journey one step at a time.